But my name is Brad Muller. I'm the Director of Sales for North America for MarkMonitor, and we really appreciate everyone's attendance today and attention to all the various presentations we've got for you. So thank you very much for that. Where do we lose the clicker? Right here we go. Thank you. So to kind of get the ball rolling here, we're gonna have a theme of these Thomas Edison quotes. So the next one is, "I've never made a mistake. I've only learned from experience," from Thomas Edison. I can't think of a person with more experience than Staten Hammock, our next presenter. Staten will be joining us to talk about fighting counterfeit sales and why what you do matters. He's our Vice President of Global Policy and Industry Development and head of our Global Relationships team. Please welcome Staten Hammock.
Morning, everyone. Welcome. Great to have your attention today. Great to be in your company, and thanks for participating in this year's summit. I'm excited to give this talk today for two reasons. One, it's not talking about GDPR and who is, which is what I've been doing at the last few MarkMonitor events all this past year. But if you have questions about that, I'm going to put a plug in for my colleague Brian King, who's in the back, who's doing a domain breakout session in the afternoon about how we navigate and do brand protection in a world where who is records are now redacted. So if you're interested in that and you have questions, we've got a section on that, but you're not going to hear it from me this time. The second reason why I'm excited to give this talk is because this talk is about the important work that everyone in this room does. And whether you're doing brand protection, whether you're doing domain name management, whether you're doing cybersecurity work, what you do is critically important. And I'm going to explain why and show you why. We are going to talk about some other nefarious activities that are happening. I'm picking up where Brian may have left off. It's a pretty dangerous world out there. And we're going to spend a minute or two highlighting some of these great societal harms that we hear about in the news every single day. And what will be interesting is at the end of that brief discussion, we're going to tie it all together and tie it back to the work that you all are doing. So let's explore the dark side for a bit. First, Brian mentioned a little bit of this, terrorism. So since 1977, the number of incidents of terrorist activity has been escalating, with the exception of 2017, escalating in terms of the number of incidents per year. Just less than 2 weeks ago, 395 people were killed in Sri Lanka as a result of 2 terrorist attacks. Sex crimes, prostitution, and that sort of thing. In the United States alone, sex crimes and prostitution is a $290 million industry. Most of the young women who are reported to be in prostitution report they were brought in by force. There are criminal gangs that work on this, criminal gangs involved in the proliferation of sex trafficking and sex crimes. Weapons trafficking. So 60% of human rights atrocities in the world today involve illegal small arms sales. Human trafficking. This is the fastest growing criminal activity next to drug trafficking. Drug trafficking is still the number one trafficking type problem, but human traffic has been the fastest growing criminal activity for the last several years, and it is second now to drug trafficking. Healthcare fraud. So these are activities where we're trying to swindle hospitals, doctors, and patients out of money that are being paid for insurance claims, valid insurance claims. And of course, the opioid crisis is in the headlines every day. The number of rogue, illegal internet pharmacies is a whack-a-mole problem. It's been something that I've been personally involved in for several years, trying to combat this as a registrar and registry operator in my former life. The number of people that rely for health-sustaining medication and try to purchase this through an illegal pharmacy. They don't get the critical medicine they need in the right dosage or the right form. Identity theft. 1 in 15 individuals will be a victim of identity theft. That means about 10 of you in this room have been victims of identity theft, whether you know it or not. Statistically, that is. Last year, there was 16.7 million people that were victimized by identity theft. And then money laundering. This is a staggering $16 trillion business. Funneling money through other criminal activities, through the banks all around the world, and making it in the hands of other criminals. So we have a rather bad state of affairs here. Now, can somebody guess, and probably you can guess because you know what the title of this talk is, can some of you guess what all of these criminal activities have in common? They are all funded by the sale of counterfeit goods online. Okay. How do I know this? Well, I'm going to get into that because I'm going to share with you some research data that my team has been able to get in a partnership with a research university. But before I get into that research, I want to just mention a little bit about the amazing people on my team, the Global Relationship Management team, and what we do. And this is a diagram here that depicts the number of relationships that we manage and leverage on your behalf and on behalf of the brand protection business. This ecosystem, as it were, consists of law enforcement agencies, trade associations, government agencies, marketplaces, registry partners, and regulatory bodies, all of which we actively participate. Members of my team actively participate and are in contact with on a weekly basis. We share information, we pull information that we can use to leverage our brand protection efforts on your behalf. And the one up in the right-hand corner is a partnership with consultants and universities. So last year, I had the good fortune of meeting the folks at Michigan State University's ACAP program, and that stands for Anti-Counterfeit Protection Program. This is one of the few academic programs in the world whose students are focusing on the counterfeit problem and what to do about it. And we thought it would be a good idea to collaborate with them and find out if we could tie a link between all of those crimes I mentioned before and counterfeit sales, which we all suspected was happening. And maybe this is, we've talked about this in literature and in the news before, but has there ever really been a comprehensive study? Well, not until this time. So we partnered with ACAP last year. They gave us 2 undergraduate students, a research assistant, 1 undergraduate student, a research assistant, and a faculty member, and put about 75 hours of work using a database that they had where they had collected information about counterfeit sales from around the world to make this connection between the crimes that I mentioned at the beginning and counterfeit sales. And we published these findings in a white paper, which is available online if you'd like to download it. It's not a very long report, an analysis, but it is, I think, an interesting read. But I'll share some of that data with you here as well. This has triggered some more interest by the United States government in particular in the counterfeit problem. And most of you have probably heard that last month President Trump issued a memo requesting that his intellectual property enforcement coordinator, in coordination with the Department of Homeland Security, is to write a report on the problem of counterfeit sales on marketplaces around the world. So this is definitely getting some attention now, more attention. So we're going to share the study results with you today, and we've been pushing out a series of blog posts and webinars about the information we found in the study. So if you're interested in hearing those or reading a little bit more about the study, that material is available to you. My team's been kind of generating different angles to this story. Okay, let me talk just a moment. Now, I'm no data research scientist, that much is for sure, but I will want to talk a little bit about some of the methodology and how this actually worked before I get into some of the numbers. So ACAP has this detection technology that goes out, scans the internet, and pulls information that they need in order to assess the correlation between counterfeit sales and other crimes. So they looked at government statistics online. They went through different law enforcement databases. All these were public sources, by the way. And they also deployed search algorithms to go pull offender data so we could see who's arrested for what and what crimes that they're convicted of. And then they categorized these codes so that they could identify this criminal activity was associated with these kinds of counterfeit sales, which were shown to be connected with these types of perpetrators, et cetera. And then they analyzed and cleansed this data to make sure that it was good data, that there was no duplicate codes, there was no duplicate references to the kind of offender data that they had pulled. And then they put this all in a database, which they call the Product Counterfeiting Database. And this database they've had since 2000, and it contains information about different products, the counterfeiting schemes, the criminal offenses that people have been charged with as it relates to counterfeiting. And so this database, as I mentioned, correlates these different crimes. It says, okay, this counterfeiting activity was also associated with, because of the perpetrators, also associated with money laundering activity. They were convicted by both, and tax evasion and other intellectual property infringement. So a little bit about the data now. So as we all suspected, and now proven out, the correlation between counterfeit sales and these other offenses was very high, particularly when you talk about white-collar occupational offenses. And what that means is folks like lawyers and doctors and physicians and other professionals are actually involved in some of these counterfeiting operations, which is scary to think about. Some of the people that you trust so much with your issues or your health are nefarious bad actors and doing a lot of criminal activities, some of which involve the sale of counterfeit goods. Of course, intellectual property infringement is got a correlation, obviously, because counterfeit sales often are trading off the brand, the trademarks, and the copyrights of your clients, your companies. Drug offenses, property crimes, violent crimes against people, and then other offenses, which include smuggling, selling or purchasing illegal firearms, prostitution, as I mentioned, possession of illegal assault weapons, and a host of other, again, nefarious activities. This is the only other slide I'll show as it represents data, but what's interesting about this slide to me, which my colleague pointed out to me, is if you look at, if you combine the conspiracy and trafficking and conspiracy and distribution shades of that circle there, you've added up to about 72% of that entire graph related to conspiracy crimes. And that means, to me, and I think to all of us, that this criminal activity is a network. There are a lot of people involved in counterfeit activity. It's not just one person who is importing, fake Chinese-made goods with your brand on it and selling it out of their basement. That is not the world of counterfeiting as we know it now. This is a sophisticated, wide network of people, of criminal organizations that are working together in a lot of different criminal-related activities and using the counterfeit sales to fund those operations. So this is not a problem that we can look at in a vacuum as a discrete issue. Counterfeit sales are not a discrete issue. This is linked to a greater number of societal harms, okay? So in order to attack this problem, we've got to elevate counterfeit sales to a level that matches the horrific nature of the crimes I mentioned before. So anti-counterfeit detection, monitoring, and enforcement, the work that you all do in this room and the work that MarkMonitor supports in that effort is important, not just protecting your brand or protecting the company's reputation or your consumers, but it's about protecting yourselves. It's about protecting your families. It's protecting everybody because we are all at some risk when you look at the broader impact of counterfeit sales on these other societal dangers. The other key takeaway is counterfeiters, as I mentioned, are often trusted licensed professionals or businesses. So if you're doing business with a partner or a reseller, I think it would be good to make sure that that vetting process happens in your company or even privately when you're engaging somebody to do work for you on a personal basis, right? Because it's the professionals that are out there portraying themselves as legitimate, but also are very involved in the counterfeiting world, as we've seen. I don't have to lecture to you because all of you are really very good about the work that you do, so it's not an issue of complacency here. But for a long time, companies would just view counterfeiting as a cost of doing business. We're just going to, these are lost sales. And that's how they looked at the problem, again, as a discrete cost of business, cost of doing business. But that is absolutely the wrong way to approach this problem. There needs to be a coordinated effort by everyone globally to look at this problem and act cooperatively to solve it, because law enforcement can't do it by itself. One trade association group can't do it by itself. This needs to be an all-out effort involving brands, search engines, law enforcement, payment processors, and shippers. And I know that there are a number of MarkMonitor colleagues who are looking as an industry to do more collaboration, to do more information sharing with law enforcement and governments so that they have the information to make informed decisions on how to attack this problem. So at MarkMonitor, my team tries to, as I showed you in that slide, try to open up connections and be the connective tissue between different groups in the ecosystem. Hey, do you know that this trade association is doing this? Or do you know, that our clients are experiencing or seeing this problem? We often go to the White House, we often go to the halls of Congress, and we're telling senior staff members there who have jurisdiction over intellectual property rights protection, this is what we're seeing. This is what we're doing about it. This is a lot. A lot more can be done. We need to see more responsible behavior sometimes from the marketplaces. We need to see more responsible behavior
by the advertising agencies or contextual advertising companies, media companies. So in order to really get a handle on these crimes, we have to choke off the counterfeits. And participation in industry collaboration and advocacy work is something that we're going to talk about with my very dear friend Kieran and Bradley Silver and my colleague Nancy right before the next break, or right before the lunch break. We're going to talk about the different kinds of industry collaboration and industry relationship work that we're involved in and some of you are involved in, and why it's important for you as a brand to also add your voice to these advocacy efforts. So, in the interest of time, because I think we want to make the break, I have just a few minutes for any questions from the audience, but so I want to stay on time here, so we'll keep that brief. Are there any questions? Yes?
That's all right. I thought I had a loud voice.
I heard you just
So
fine.
is there a way for us to actually tie back when we report phishing or counterfeit or infringement to you through the university to say, hey, you know what, there is a lot of phishing. It's important about your brand protection, but we also tied back this actor to, say, gun smuggling. Right? Is there a way for us to do that in order to highlight to our internal company that says, we know it's a poor customer experience getting phished using our brand, but it's important because this group seems to be doing something even worse with our brand after they make money off of a phish. Is there that kind of correlation that you can make?
I don't know the answer, but I would suspect the answer could be yes. But I haven't asked the guys at ACAP to run data on any particular brand or phishing program. But if we give them enough data points to run against their database, they might be able to pull some correlations. So.
I've seen a lot of very effective PSAs done by the MPAA and other similar organizations. Aside from perhaps educating your consumers or your fans, depending on what company you work for, about these dangers and where the money actually goes to, how else do you impact your fans, your customers, and get them engaged and educate them against buying counterfeit product? For example, at our live events, I'm personally working with law enforcement to seize counterfeit merchandise being sold on the street. But I mean, it's obvious to the purchaser that these are counterfeit goods when they're coming out of a duffel bag or laying on the sidewalk, and yet they don't seem to care. So I'm just trying to see how we can reach out to the consumers to make them care as much as we do.
I have an idea for you. The education is of critical importance. So how do we do that? Well, one of the things that my team is looking at is partnering with a nonprofit organization called the Unreal Campaign that sends experts into the public schools or private schools to talk to kids about the dangers of counterfeit and what that really means. Because I have 2 teenage daughters. They like to buy stuff online all the time, right? Don't we all? We're all probably members of the Prime Club. And they have no idea whether the products that they're getting are counterfeit or not. There's no hard data yet that can give us a good fix on what percentage of online goods bought and sold around the world are counterfeit goods. I'd love to see that data if it existed, but I haven't been able to find it yet. But I think it starts with at a young age. And this Unreal program gives kids the awareness tools and some basic knowledge about what happens and the link between buying counterfeit goods and other bad activities. So
I absolutely agree with you. I actually spoke for the Unreal campaign in inner city high school, and the kids
Great.
were absolutely amazed at what is counterfeit, what is not counterfeit, what can happen. So I do agree with you there. It starts early on. I'm actually at the moment talking about the adults.
yeah. Well, all we could do is shout it from the rooftops, So, as I said, we've been pushing out content, in blogs and webinars, writing to the Intellectual Property Enforcement Coordinator's office to say, hey, look, we all suspected this. Here's some hard data, and this is showing the impacts of the problem. And I think that's all we can continue to do. As I said the other day, or said yesterday to a group of to clients, you have to go into a government agency's or law enforcement office quite a few times before you can get some momentum going around anything that you do. And same with regulatory work that we do, and government advocacy work, and work that we do at ICANN. It's a slow, glacial process to get things moving, but we just keep banging away at it. Yes.
Hi, I work in the healthcare industry, and great that we're having the discussion about, bringing awareness to counterfeit products. But what is MarkMonitoring, I guess I want to say, doing when it comes to? Oftentimes, we know that buzzwords, especially in the healthcare industry, right? Pharma and things like that are they're big contributors. That's their moneymaker, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing what is MarkMonitoring doing or aiding and helping some of those in our industry that bring awareness to what's counterfeit versus what's just an alternative to who the main actors are in this particular industry? Oftentimes you see that if you're talking about healthcare specifically, it's not necessarily that these companies are counterfeit or they're bringing counterfeit products. They're just bringing products that are in competition with the large actors, and then that concept of labeling it or placing counterfeit on it and necessarily gearing customers away from those things because we have main actors who are, of course, pumping the money into the advocacy for their product. How do we go about educating the differences between the counterfeit versus this is an alternative that is not the mainstream but is an option?
That's a great question. To answer your question, I'm not aware of anything that MarkMonitor is doing to educate in that healthcare area about the problem you described. But we do have relationships with a lot of trade associations and advocacy organizations that are doing that kind of work for specific industry sectors. For example, the Center for Safe Internet Pharmacies, CSIP, has been tackling the rogue online pharmacy problem for about 6 years, involving payment processors, search engines, registries and registrars in a collaborative effort to tackle that. And they've made some tremendous amount of success. They've met with a great amount of success in being able to push some of those actors off US-based platforms and isolating them in a few other registries, registrars, or regions in the world. And I think that's kind of how you have to tackle the problem. Try to get it isolated in a way, and then you can work on the governments to do multi-jurisdictional access and extradition and all of that.
I just wanted to bring the attention to the fact of, like, sometimes when we have buzzwords in industries in general, that can also be used as a way of necessarily swaying versus really being adherent to what the problem is.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your question. Oh, there are more questions.
Going back to your ACAP, are they thinking about creating a database? Because my company, we have a fairly large marketplace presence. So we have authorized resellers that we try to vet and we try to keep to a manageable level. But to your point of how do you, vet them or, just put them through some sort of process that verifies, that they are who they are, because with the whack-a-mole situation, are they compiling this data of these people? Because it could be like a yard sale item. There's really only 1 million of them in the country, yet they show up all the time. Is there a way to see if this is a small community or if it's a larger systemic problem that is just, some guy who sees I can try to sell this product out there? And then are they going to then offer that to you maybe as a service for us, or, a resource that companies can use to confirm that these people are who they are or they aren't who they are?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer, but I like that idea of exploring with Michigan State University other potential uses of that database for us and our clients. I talked about the database that they had to correlate the criminal activities. I would imagine they've got other databases that they can run and try to identify bad actors. Let me go back to them. I have actually a laundry list of other research ideas for ACAP. I'll add that to the list. But from what I've heard from a number of you in the room, that if there is capability at this university to help us help you, I will certainly explore all those opportunities. And because I like working with. My dad is a retired college professor, and I love working with students myself. So I think it's a great partnership. And my time is up.
So some of the products have very short lifespan. I mean, in terms of longevity of how desired they are.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole anti-counterfeiting measures are all lagging, right? In terms of the product comes out and then you take a while before you get on it or try to find out if it's being counterfeited or not. How do you deal with products that are short-lived in terms of counterfeiting? For example, let's say a new electronic device comes out, and do you lose interest in finding out whether it's counterfeited in 3 months, 6 months? What exactly?
At MarkMonitor? Well, I mean, it's what our clients want us to do. Some of our clients want us to run reports and do the scans. We do our scanning technology daily, right? And whatever we're able to pick up and analyze that period. If a counterfeit good is only available for a short period of time, I mean, we should, as long as it's available, we should be able to pick it up. But you're right, over time, we may not be able to track what happens after a certain period of time. Is that your question?
Yeah.
I wanted to mention one thing that I thought you were getting to, which was the time to counterfeit. How long does it take once your product comes out before you expect to see counterfeit goods appear? And we looked into that a little while back and found out, much to the surprise, that sometimes the time to counterfeit is less than 0. It's before your product goes into the market, or before it's before it's being sold commercially, there is a counterfeit already out there. Somebody has gotten some heads up or intelligence about what your product is, either by looking at the trademarks you file, or I don't know, seeing some activity around product development, and they anticipate what that counterfeit product is and are first to market, if you can believe that. So the time to counterfeit can be absolutely 0 or less than 0. Before you actually produce something, there's a counterfeit for it, which is remarkable.
And do you have some sort of geographical heat maps that you found a counterfeit in a particular geographical area, and then you map it out so that if some other product comes along, then you have?
I haven't generated a heat map, but with the data we have, we certainly could do that. That shows where different violations are occurring in different industry verticals and different kinds of products. Because I know for a fact that, you know, say illegal pharmacies a lot are coming out of Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe, but you know, luxury goods, they're coming out of China mostly. So there is a disparate layering of the kinds of counterfeit products you see out there and where they're coming from geographically.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you all very much.